Welcome back to A People's Guide to Publishing. I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing and Distribution. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 25 years.
I'm Ellie Blue. I'm the editorial and marketing director here at Microcosm. We are an independent mid-list publisher based in Portland, Oregon. We have 14 employees, over 650 titles in print with 20 to 40 new books per year, and we distribute thousands of titles from other publishers.
We started this podcast so that we can share what we've learned with newer publishers so that you can learn from our mistakes.
Or perhaps you just want to better understand the publishing industry.
This week, we are going to talk about something that is a frequent and seemingly very sexy news item when someone reinvents publishing or figures out things that they think people had never figured out in the past 200 years.
Reinventing publishing is definitely a very sexy topic,
sounding,
especially if you were disrupting publishing.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, disrupting publishing. That's an excellent point, Ellie. I don't know where I get off thinking that someone is merely reinventing it.
So what is the most recent way you've heard this happening?
Oh, every day. So if you use Twitter, notably book Twitter, or read, these sort of grabby headlines, you will often see where it'll be like, this publishing company has figured out a new way and, essentially pays impossibly more and or has some sort of weird workaround, and so 10 to 15 years ago it was the quote-unquote hybrid model where authors would invest in their own books instead of the publishers investing in their books. But the real problem of that is thoroughly addressed in the book, where you just don't have enough emotional distance to develop the book correctly, and you don't. And it's when you ultimately are the one with the say and the power at the end of the day, you aren't going to do what's in the best interest of the book. And
by you mean the author?
Yes, that's correct. And so more recently, the new take on it was, what is it? Micro-investing, is that the correct term when you get lots of people to make small ownership things,
I thought micro-investing was when you loaned someone $300 and then paid back interest.
Yeah, that's what this is.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's one case where, it's a upstart publisher, and that's their whole thing, is they're with all these micro investments, we will create the publishing company of the future, blah, blah, blah. And the reason for that is publishing is very expensive, and it's low yield, low return, high cost, requires a tremendous amount of upfront investment. So people are trying to sort of hack that with the whole idea of if I just have lots of people, small amounts of money, then that's a workaround. And that is a workaround, and that may well work. But, it's at the end of the day, who are the people investing? But, the people that are invested in that kind of, literary movement or whatever.
It's like a nonprofit. It's like nonprofit publishing without the tax deduction.
Yeah. And
you're not going to get your money back, but you're going to feel good about it.
Yeah. And so, right. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. And so it's sort of the thing when you're the authors are essentially still the ones paying for the books, because they're often the ones that are yeah, I'll give you $300, and, they're just not going to get it back. Yeah. And then, but the one this week was even, it had even bolder claims, which I always love, where they said that they would pay $40,000 advances to every single book, and you would get a 40% royalty on the book.
A royalty on what, though?
Did not specify.
Uh-oh.
So let's hope it's not on the cover price, because they would be out of business before the time this podcast is released.
How are they going to afford this $40,000 advance on these books?
This is a wonderful question. They are essentially seeking VC, venture capital, wow. Meaning rich people, give me money, which is, a very common way that a lot of these fast ascendancy growth startups get off the ground. But, those are books that can scale and expand, and sort of the problem with this is let's say you publish 20 books in a year, if 8 of those are flops, or even 4 of those are flops, you've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, because your costs aren't just that author royalty, it's the book development, it's, your printing, your, just like sort of the material costs of being a publisher, the distribution, etc. And, and it's just not a growth model. It's like, it sounds good. It sounds like, oh, publishers have done us wrong all these years. But the reality and the problem of all of this is that, like, publishing is fundamentally fair the way the math and the numbers work, as far as, like, splitting the pie. The author normally receives the largest slice of pie.
So you're saying traditional publishing, the model isn't broken, but something's broken because authors really seem to have trouble getting paid.
Well, partly, and it's like, I don't mean to sound like a city government when I say, like, oh, there's just a few bad apples in our police force. But it's more along the lines of, like,
there's
yes,
one really bad apple.
You can find publishers that don't pay their bills or maybe go out of their way to, find deductions and things like that. But by and large, it's a relationship. Everybody's invested in that relationship. People make mistakes, but by and large, it's fair, and it's almost always in the author's favor if in the vast majority of large companies,
So what is broken?
So the market is just too crowded, so like if you go back far enough, the problem was that, there was just too many books being written. And then so just a lot of people felt rejected and left out and sad and bummed and, like the thing that I am told most often as like the proof of this concept is, oh, well, look at how many publishers refused and rejected Harry Potter before it became one of the best-selling books of all time, and that is a completely wrong-headed idea. It's not that all publishers are interchangeable and just can't recognize your brilliance. It's that the publishers that rejected Harry Potter probably would have turned it into a flop, that Harry Potter wasn't successful because of the fact that it was Harry Potter, because it wasn't a commodity yet. It became a commodity by the way it was released and marketed and loved and discovered, and how they did roll out in multiple different countries. And it's not, it doesn't prove anything to say, oh, this book was a success, so everybody that rejected it was wrong. That's just assuming that all publishers are interchangeable, which is like completely fundamentally false.
So, like, what is the answer if it's not to, like... And, by the way, I think the project of taking money from very rich people and distributing it to authors is a great one, but, like...
It's just not a sustainable one.
No, I mean, go for it, but...
You can't go back the following year
not
and
gonna,
be like,
fix publishing.
Can I get another $500,000? I ran out.
I guess it will, like... It does... I guess it does. I guess the problem is that it does, like, kind of change expectations when you're out there being like, this is the problem with publishing, is that and it's not just, fair to authors.
It's like spreading misinformation,
So what should people do? How should people do?
So, I mean, I would say the real trouble here is the, like, when Amazon essentially marketed the very same concept, publishers aren't fair, publishing is, greedy, whatever, it led, and then they simultaneously said, we are the solution, publish with us, get 70% royalties, and, use other, like, sort of misleading with statistics. They just completely flooded and crowded out the market, making it essentially impossible to sell most fiction or memoir or books. It just essentially choked out the market, where the average life sale on the average book went down 50%, and that's not to say, you'll still have successful books, but your likelihood of becoming a bestseller is much, much worse, and your probability of average sales is down 50%, and then that's not even the books that sell 2 or 20 copies in their lifetime, which also do exist.
So the answer is resist Amazon?
Well, the answer is, like, you have a way to reach your audience, that isn't just, I'll make something really good and then publishing will save me and the world will discover my genius and, I'll be loved for all time. That's sort of the, utopian thing of, that like people latch onto like the handful of stories of that happening and ignore the part about how those books were marketed.
Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub,
On Twitter at Microcosm,
on Facebook at Microcosm Publishing,
on Instagram at Microcosm_pub.
and here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.